some of you have noticed the title of this stream, which is, Was Taliesin Wrong? Now, I want to talk to you about this, and I'll probably put this on the second channel as well, because thank you to everyone who subbed to the second channel, by the way. We have 30,000 subscribers on there now, which I think is fantastic. And our editor, Rylar, did a brilliant job on this video, a really fucking long edit, 1 hour 24, talking about the controversial interview in the French magazine, or the French website, sorry. Magazines don't exist anymore. I don't want to go over it all again. Rylar will put a picture of that video up on screen right now to show you which one I'm talking about. It's the last video on this channel before this one, right? And it was a very controversial interview. It caused a lot of debate in the community. Anne Stickney and Catherine Bankson, who I thought gave some very good answers, didn't always answer the question that was being asked. I had my issues with the way some of those questions were asked. I thought some of the questions were a little bit passive-aggressive. I'm willing to accept some of that could be a translation issue, absolutely. The person who actually conducted the interview called me out on Twitter and said I was a bit rude about it. And you know what? They were right. They were right. I stand by what I think about the questions, but I probably was a bit rude about it. I wasn't thinking about the person on the other side of the handle, as it were, and I was probably a little bit personal about some of their questions, and I regret that, and I said sorry, and I think all is well there now. Just as many people upset that I made fun of French people, although we say making fun of French people, can we see what making fun of French people entails? This is how this went. Do they not get cinematics in France? Seriously, you know how like loot boxes are illegal in some parts of the world? And so like in Belgium, you know, Overwatch just doesn't have loot boxes, right? Or whatever. Do they just not get cinematics in France? Are they illegal? Are you not allowed to have any cinema in France if it doesn't feature old men smoking and like young women with their tits out? Is that the law? Do they look at WoW cinematics and go, there's no young ladies with their tits out? This is illegal. Now, many people thought that was me, you know, kind of making fun of the French, but I think clearly that's me showing how cool the French are, right? Did we not think that was cool? I wish I was as cool as that. So if you were French watching that, please, like, don't be offended. I mean, be offended by my bad French accent. I think that's fair enough. But if you think I was criticizing you, don't. That's me saying you're cool, man. That's me saying you're cool. So anyway, hopefully the French are okay with me now anyway. Yeah, like smoking and making films of young ladies' tits is objectively cool. Like, fact. So yeah, be offended by my French accent, but please don't think that I was ragging on France, because I don't give a fuck about France enough to rag on it. Yeah, anyway, so then we went over the interview, which has been very controversial. And one of the things we spent a long time talking about, and we even went back to the cinematic and rewatched it, was, you know, what caused the Dragon Isles to wake up. I can't even remember the question now. Let's see if I can find it on here. And something was about, like, you know, the islands just wake up and no one knows, you know, why. And for me, and this isn't me saying that you have to like it, and like, so, and my take on it is that, you know, the opening cinematic very much tells us how the Dragon Isles woke up. It being, you know, you will know our coming by the waking of the land. The land wakes up, and that is triggered by the dragons coming back, not the other way around. And some people in my comments didn't like this. Some people in my comments were very annoyed and upset by this. Something that got mentioned a lot in my comments was this idea. A lot of you clearly didn't understand what I was saying, which is fine. Obviously my fault for not explaining it enough. But a comment that came up a relative amount was pointing out a short story that came out before Dragonflight launched. Here we go. In a short story before Dragonflight launched, Rathian got a Y boner in his heart. A heart-on, if you will. And so did every other dragon, and Mummy Alexstrasza told him he's homesick for a place he's never been to. So yeah, the Isles were awakened before they were looking for it. And this got pointed out a lot. No, Tali, you're forgetting the short story where it's described as the Dragon Isles literally calling out to them, like a magic beacon sort of thing, you know? And when I saw all these comments, I was a bit worried because I was like, was I wrong? So yeah, at this stage I thought, wow, I mean, what? I need to go back and reread this short story because people think it proves me wrong in what I'm saying about the Isles. And, you know, I don't mind being wrong, but I don't like to stay wrong, right? If I'm wrong, I'll eat shit. And but the most important thing is kind of learning and not being wrong. And that applies for WoW lore as much as anything else. So very handily, someone who was saying this exact same thing to me on Twitter today actually posted some of this short story. Which is great, very handy. So now I can, without even having to look it up, I can read the relevant bits to you. And bear in mind that these bits of short story were shared specifically to prove me wrong. So, I mean, this is the definition of a steel man, right? Wait, was this you, Sean? If it was you, I genuinely thank you for it. And you know, like, no coming at Sean here. I'm really glad that they did this. Well, Sean, genuinely thank you. Like, and no hate on Sean or anything like that. I mean, that goes without saying on this channel, I hope. But always good to reiterate. So, Kalek, Rathian asked slowly, "Are you in pain?" Kalek had been lost in thought. Then he started. "Oh, no. Well," he amended, "not so much a pain as a sorrow. There have been various times in my life when I felt desolate, alone. That there was something I wanted, needed, but couldn't have." "I'm experiencing the same sensation," Rathian said, red eyes narrowing, "as if there is a weight on my chest, a feeling in my bones I can't articulate." "Yes, that's it exactly," exclaimed Kalek, "and also as if I'm missing a piece of myself that I didn't know I had, but now I yearn for it." They looked at each other for a long moment, and then they made out. Rathian spoke cautiously. "If we are both feeling this sensation, then perhaps the other dragons are too," Kalek breathed on his neck. For the first time in a long time, hope flickered within Rathian, and he was overcome with a desire to meet a certain someone, as if summoned. "I hate to humble myself yet again, but I am uncertain if I will find answers, but perhaps we should. Go to Worm's Rest and ask Alexstrasza some questions." Rathian quirked an eyebrow. "Let's stop finishing each other's sentences, shall we?" Oh my god, they do love each other. Does this come from Tumblr? Yeah. Kalek laughed, then moved his hands elegantly up up Rathian's thigh. "Opening a portal. Well." A glimpse at its center revealed a cool teal and blue-white landscape. I mean... Perfect. I was growing frightfully weary of all this purple. I mean... And with that, Rathian stepped through. "It would seem we are not alone in our mysterious melee," Rathian remarked. "That's an understatement," Kalek murmured. They had materialized near the base of Wormrest Temple, finding themselves in the center of the largest gathering of dragons Rathian had ever seen. Some wore their visages, and it did not escape Rathian that the many placed their hands on their chest, over their hearts, from time to time, waiting for the Dragon Queen to address them. Rathian did not expect to see any of his own flight there, of course. There were plenty of red and bronze dragons, and many greens as well, but he was saddened to spot so few blue dragons in comparison. Foreshadowing. Kalek was right about them being scattered. "There's barely a blue dragon flight at all now. Stay here, waiting with the rest of them, if you like," Rathian told Kalek, "but I refuse to squander a single moment more." The troubling sensation was not abating, but rather increasing. By the way, no one told them about this big meeting, did they? But I refuse to squander a single... Okay, troubling sensation was not abating, but rather increasing. Suiting actions to words, Rathian shifted and flew directly to the top of the temple. He was done with waiting to find the Dragon Isles, waiting for the dream to stop tormenting him, waiting to understand what this cursed feeling was and why he was feared the unknown. Here we go, and here's the important bit. And yet, as he recalled the joy he'd witnessed at the wedding, the warmth, blah, 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 Alexstrasza was in her visage, blah, 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 blah. Beside him, blah, 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 blah. Okay, then he goes to Alexstrasza, he says, "Alexstrasza, this feeling, this..." Lost for words, Rathian thumped his chest. "What is happening to us?" She turned, and her face, as it had been during his last visit, was soft and alight with joy. Straight to the point. You are ever true to form, Rathian, she said with gentle mirth. Why, thank you. Alexstrasza stepped forward, and as if there was not and never had been mistrust or resentment between them, gently placed a hand on his face. To his own surprise, he allowed it, comprehending that the significance of this moment transcended any quarrels. Young one, the Dragon Queen said, exchanging a sage look with Nosdormu. You have heard the call, and you have answered. Which I think is pretty clear, right? Rathian did not understand. The call. Yes, the call, she said, speaking to all of those standing closely around her. One long awaited. All of us, here, below, anywhere in the world, we have all been called, and we have heard it with our hearts. The Dragon Isles are awaiting our return. But, Rathian shook his head, still not comprehending. Rathian, she said softly, you are homesick. We can read the rest of it if you like, but here's the thing. So, all of those, I think this is worth talking about because I actually think I'd forgotten how good this was. I can understand why people read this short story and come into my comments and say, no, Tali, the Dragon Isles was already awake before the dragons got there. They were, it was calling out to the dragons. It called them back like a magic beacon sort of thing. But I think that's to slightly misunderstand this story and the point of this story. And actually, the really nice thing about the story, that is what we are supposed to think, for sure. 100%. Up until this point of the story, that is absolutely what we're supposed to think. Something is calling the dragons, And then the twist of this story is that it's literal just mundane homesickness. It's literally like the dragons are feeling something which is, for us, recognizably human. And it's something many of us, most of us, I would wager, have felt. It can be interpreted both ways, indeed. Well, I don't think it's supposed to be interpreted both ways, because I think when Alexstrasza explicitly says, this thing you're describing is homesickness, I think then any other interpretation kind of goes out the window. Because, I would agree with you if she didn't turn around and explicitly say, no, yeah, that thing you're describing is literally homesickness, which she does in the story. And it's lovely. It's really nice. It's actually really, really good. And I think it's a really nice thing that the story does here. It's wow, okay? So you're assuming it's some magic thing. You're assuming it's some big magic. How can Rathian be homesick for the Dragon Isles the same as Alex? In the same way that you feel connection to a people that you've never met. In the same way that if you have Italian heritage or kind of Irish heritage or something or whatever it is, even if you've never been there, you can feel a connection to that, and you can feel a yearning for that. In Welsh, we call that hiraeth. Hiraeth is a nostalgic homesickness for a home that probably never really existed. That's what hiraeth means. Hiraeth is that yearning you have for a past and a place that is probably was never really there. And that's exactly what these guys are feeling here. And as far as them all feeling it at the same time, have you ever watched a nature documentary? Have you ever heard of the word instinct? How do birds know to go south in the winter? How do elephants know to go to the elephant's graveyard? How do any animals know how to do anything? There is an instinct in living things that is almost kind of like biological memory. And that's what this is describing. It's just homesickness. Is it heightened? Is it exaggerated for the sake of the story? Yes, 100%. Of course it is, because it's a story and it is set in a magic world all in all. But what they're describing is the pull of your people. What they're describing is the pull of your ancestral home. I feel like, from what I gather, this is something that a lot of people, if their parents are from a place and they're born somewhere else. So I know that Evitel feels it very strongly with Poland, She was born in America, she grew up in America, but she was always very aware that her people were Polish. And she's always felt that very, very strongly. Why is it pulling at them all at the same time now? Well, who's to say it's only now? Who's to say it's only now? And when big world-ending threats are over and things have quietened down, isn't that when you start to feel homesick? Because all the dragons are gathered there. I think you're desperately, desperately trying to ignore the message of this story. I feel like what you're doing is you are desperately trying to misunderstand this story. This is a really lovely short story with a nice twist that has a nice message in it. And what you guys are doing is you're reading the first half and then not being willing to accept that you got done. You're not willing to accept the explicitly said twist. She literally, I don't know what to tell you guys. She literally turns round and she says, what you are feeling is homesickness. And I feel like this is such a brilliant microcosm of how the WoW community works, because it's literally telling you. She's breaking the fourth wall here, guys. And a lot of you are being like, nope. The whole point of this story was to set up that the dragons are yearning for home, right? And they set it up as some magical thing, and then they put it into terms that human beings can understand and recognize. And you're ignoring the point of the story. And yet, do you know what? There could be some magic involved as well. And here's the other thing, right? Even though this isn't important, here's the other thing. The Dragon Isles can still call out to people even if it is still sleeping. The land is sleeping, but if there is a consciousness to the Isles, it could still be calling out to the dragons, but it needs the dragons to be close for the Isles to awaken and for the actual life of the Isles to kind of wake up and start growing again, as we see in the cinematic. In which case, what I said is still right. So even if you absolutely have to ignore the message of this short story, and that's fine, you can do that. It's okay. Because homesickness doesn't magically happen to everyone at once. Dude, have you ever been homesick? Whenever I talk about these things, whenever I talk about literature and human emotions, it terrifies me, honestly. It terrifies me how so many people don't seem to understand these human emotions that are present in literature. Have you never felt homesick? Yeah, have you never felt homesick when you're at home? Dude, classic happened because of homesickness. Yeah, but if it wasn't magic, Tali, how come everyone was calling for WoW Classic long before they ever announced it? People are ready for things to happen. Homesick while at home? No, not really, to be honest. You don't recognize that? You don't recognize the feeling of feeling homesick even when you're at home? You've never felt Hiraeth? You've never felt that? I feel sorry for you if you haven't. I feel like the thing that I'm sure other languages have words for it as well, but I feel like that yearning, that nostalgia that you feel for your home, even if you're there, because it's the nostalgia that you're feeling for parts of your home that don't exist anymore. It's a very recognizable human feeling. And honestly, if you've never felt it, I completely understand why you didn't understand this story. honestly. So here's the thing. And the thing is, right, even if you want to discount that entirely, which I don't think you should, I think you should take the story as it's written, and I think you should appreciate the thing that the story is doing and the thing that the story is saying. And I think it's a better story if you do that. And it's a really nice story when you do that. It's like, lovely, thank you. I think you should do that. But even if you don't want to, and even if you want to read it as literally the Dragon Isles calling out to everyone, like a magic beacon, that still doesn't mean that the life of the Dragon Isles, like the actual kind of fauna of the Dragon Isles, didn't wake up because the dragons got there. Like, it doesn't. Like, in fact, it's still like, the whole kind of like the Emperor, let me put it into terms you might understand. The Emperor in 40k is a vegetable, right? And is like on life support and doesn't respond to anything, but can still kind of mentally call out to people, still has like an omnipotence in a way sort of thing, But you would never describe the Emperor as, if someone came in and said, oh, the Emperor is waking up, you'd be like, Emperor's been awake for ages. He's been calling out to people, right? You understand that, don't you? So in the same way, the Dragon Isles could easily call out to people and still not be able to wake up until the dragons got close. There's no contradiction there. So even doing it on those terms, which I don't think you should, because I think that ruins a really nicely written story. But even if you insist on like stripping all romance from the world and doing this writer dirty and insisting that the Dragon Isles were calling out, it still doesn't contradict the fact that the dragons needed to be close to wake up the Isles. Still doesn't. Sorry. And that's really the important thing that we should be focusing on here. I don't care if you think the Dragon Isles was actually calling out or not. Fact is, it doesn't prove me wrong. And like, also, I think you're really getting hung up on like the literalism here. The literalism is of being like, oh no, it called out. Guys, have you never heard someone saying, my home is calling me? When they're feeling nostalgic and homesick for it? Have you never heard like a group of people say that? I feel like home is calling for me. It's not literal. France isn't resonating and calling people back to it, but people feel a call and people feel a pull. You can't take everything so literally all the time. It's just nice sometimes. Sometimes it's just romantic. Sometimes it's just nice. And yeah, okay, like maybe you can say, well, they all want to go back at the same time. What's going on with that? Why can't it just be an instinct? Why can't it just be an instinct, a group instinct that groups of animals and people have? Yeah, there's probably some magic at the end, at the bottom of it somewhere, but I don't understand the insistence that some people have of not just like understanding the nice thing about this story. This story's really good, and I've forgotten how good this story was. Thank you for making me read it again, because it's great. It's so lovely when she turns around and goes, Rathian, she said softly, you are homesick. The ache, the desperate longing for something he had never had. Homesick. The Dragon Isles had never been denied him. They were waiting for him and for every other dragon on Azeroth, his people. It's so cool. It's so lovely. It's a really good story. It's a really good short story. Rathian had not been excluded. He was being welcomed. He belonged. It's great. Homesick, he mused to himself. But he had a home now, and soon he would have a flight. Well, he wouldn't, but And I'm not, here's the thing, right? I'm not criticizing you if you don't want to see that in it, okay? You're not wrong, because literature is subjective and you're allowed to appreciate it and like it and read it however you want. I personally think they're literally just talking about homesickness, and that's why I like the story so much. But even if you don't, that's absolutely okay. But just to be very clear, even if you don't, that doesn't contradict what we were saying about the Dragon Isles waking up when the dragons got near it and because the dragons got near it. I don't think it contradicts it at all. Hopefully I've made that very clear.